Okay, so I'm continuing on with elimination. So what you just did was substitution. Elimination, I actually think, is easier, and I typically find that the kids find it easier. So the object here is basically, basically here, if I go back to kind of what I was talking about up here, you know, these two things eliminated because I had a positive 2x and a negative 2x, and they become 0. It's the same thing as when I do this right here. If I have a negative 10, I add 10 to both sides because I want to eliminate this. That is what our elimination is. So what we're wanting to know is if I add, because we're always going to add down, if I add down, will either my x's or my y's eliminate? Well, I have 2x minus 2x, so when I add down, those eliminate. Okay, so we're adding them just like regular numbers. If I take now a negative 9 and a negative 1, and I put them together, I get a negative 10. And then I take my 22 minus 2, and I get 20. Okay, so again, your x's here have eliminated. That's what I want to happen every time. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by a negative 10, because now we just have an equation to solve, and I get a negative 2. Now, just like what we did in our last videos, okay, we want to substitute now and find our other variable. So you can either go the top equation or the bottom. It doesn't matter. I'm going to choose the bottom one. I think it looks a little bit easier. You could choose the top if you wanted. But again, I'm just going to substitute this for my y. So I have a negative 2x minus, and look, my y is a negative 2, so do be careful there. So I get a negative 2x plus 2 equals a negative 2. I'm going to move my 2 over. Negative 2x equals a negative 4. Divide x equals 2. And so my answer here would be 2, because that's my x, negative 2. Okay? So I want you to look at number 12. If I add down, if I just straight add, if I add my x's together, will one of them eliminate? Or if I add my y's, will one of them eliminate? So if you know what's going on, go ahead and work through this. If not, I will start it up in just a minute. Okay, so in this case, when I take a negative 4 and a positive 4, those do eliminate. I get a negative 6y equals 18, because I'm just adding down. I'm going to divide by a negative 6, so y equals a negative 3. Now, if y is equal to a negative 3, I'm going to pick one of my original equations, so I'm just going to get rid of all that stuff. I'm going to pick either one. It does not matter. And I'm going to choose to solve for x. So I'm going to pick the top one this time. Now, if you want to, you can pick the bottom one and try and see if you get the same answer. So again, I'm putting this y in for this y. So I get a negative 4x plus 6 equals 6. I'm going to minus my 6 over, so I get a negative 6x equals 0. Remember, if I divide by a negative 4, if I divide 0 by anything, I get 0. And so my answer would be x, y. Again, be sure you put it in that order. Okay, so that is the easiest elimination we're going to do. Okay, now let's look at the next type of elimination. Okay, so when I look at, again, my x's, or if I look at my y's, the question is when I add down, is either one going to eliminate? Well, hopefully you see that a negative 8 and a negative 8 is a negative 16. Nothing will eliminate. And I have a negative 1 and a negative 6, so that does not eliminate. So nothing will eliminate at this point, okay? But hopefully you see that if I have the same number, if one was positive and one was negative, then it would eliminate. Okay? So what I'm going to do is need to do something to change that to a positive. Okay? I need to be able to do something to change that -8 to a positive. Well, if all I'm doing is what we call a sign change, then I'm just going to take and multiply that by a -1. Okay? So here's how I'm going to write that. I'm going to leave the top one alone, and I'm going to take this bottom equation and I'm going to multiply it by, I'll get this out of the way, a -1. Okay? So when I multiply that by a -1, I get 8x. When I multiply this, I get positive 6y. And when I take a -1 times 24, I get a -24. Okay? So again, that's what I mean by the number is the same. I just need the sign changed. Okay? So now when I add down, these two will become 0. And I'm going to get 5y equals a -40. And now I can just solve. Divide by 5. Y equals a -8. Okay? And now I'm going to pick one of my original equations. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that just so I can see. One of my original equations, it doesn't matter which one. I'm going to choose this one. And all I'm going to do is substitute in that -8. Okay? So I have -8x minus my y, which was a -8. Okay, so that's all I'm doing is putting that there. That equals a -16. Okay, so I get a -8x plus 8 equals a -16, because that comes from my double negatives. I'm going to move this 8 over. I'm going to divide by the -8, so x equals 3. Okay, so my answer will be 3, -8. Okay? Now, I want you to look at the next equation, and I'm actually going to get rid of a little bit of this so we're not so congested here with stuff. Okay? So I want you to look at these two equations. And in particular, what we're looking at is looking at your x's and then looking at your y's. And we'll either eliminate. That's my first question. So you always want to check, we'll either eliminate. Hopefully your answer is no. Then you say, do I have any coefficients? Coefficients are the front numbers that are the same that I could just multiply by a negative. And the answer there is yes, because these two are the same. So if I multiply my bottom one by a negative, I would have one positive and one negative. So my step is to just rewrite. I'm not changing anything. I'm just rewriting that first equation. And now I'm multiplying by distributing that -1 through all three of those. So take your time. So a -1 times 6 would be a -6. A -1 times 10 would be a -10. And a -1 times 30 would be a -30. And now when I add, these two will eliminate. 6 minus 10 would be a -4. And -6 and -30 would be a -36. So I'm going to go ahead and divide. And y is 9. Now again, I'm going to come back up to either one of my equations, and I'm going to put in the 9 for the y. So I am going to just choose my first equation. You can do either one. So 6x plus 6 times the y equals a -6. So 6x plus, what is that? 6 times 9 is, 54. I'm going to move the 54 over. That would be a negative 60. Divide. So x equals a negative 10. So again, my answer would be a negative 10, 9. Okay, I'm going to stop there with your homework help, and then I will do the next two on another video, just so if you need to stop for a little bit.